How's it going? Today I'm talking about what should training and mileage look like between races.
This is Running to the Castle, a podcast for injury-prone runDisney runners on a journey to running magical miles. Join me, Dr. Allie, as I share the secrets I've gathered as a runner, doctor of physical therapy, and coach. You'll learn the exact ways I get my clients to the castle strong without feeling broken or held together with KT tape as they cross the finish line.
I got this question in my Instagram DMs, runDisney DPT, if you have a question. I am quickest to respond to questions there. I do get them in email, which is great. I love when you respond to email, but if you're like, what is taking so long? I will say DMs is faster. So, got this question. What should training/mileage look like between races? I did the marathon and I'm doing wine and dine. Training for that starts in June. What should my long runs look like until then? So I am going to answer this. I'm also going to answer just between multiple races. So in general, you want to maintain enough mileage that you aren't starting completely over, right? Because you know me, I recommend actually going from a 0 to 5K before starting training for another race that's not a 5K. Now, of course, if you're doing a 5K and that's the longest distance you're doing, you do the 0 to 5K and you keep going with that. But all of my training plans beyond a 5K, so 10K, 10 miler, half marathon, 2-course challenge, 3-course springtime surprise challenge, marathon, goofy, and dopey, they all start at a 5K. So what you don't want to happen, which I'm so glad this follower asked this question, you don't want to fall lower than at least a 5K or somewhere in that realm so that you're not starting completely from zero. So the way I design my training plans is to make it so that you can be consistent, you don't get overworked, you don't get overtrained, and you don't make running miserable, right? Like, we want this to be enjoyable. I have created my training plans so that it can stay enjoyable. Now, of course, it's ultimately up to you with how you're doing your workouts. I recommend long runs stay easy and the shorter hard workouts stay hard. So those speed workouts. And then you also utilize cross training. By mixing up all of those different workouts, the chances of you falling off training because you A, get injured, or B, just feel like this is a chore as opposed to something you want to do, the chances are low, right? Like, I am not a runner first, so to speak. So meaning my sports growing up, running was our punishment. Like, nobody wanted to run. I told this story yesterday. Actually, I got interviewed for the Mile 20 Mindset with Alan Maldonado yesterday at the time of recording this. And one of the things that I talked about was how when I started running, like, I wasn't a runner growing up. Like, I didn't get into cross training. I didn't get into cross country. I didn't get into track. I had coaches who wanted me to. My high school freshman gym teacher, Mr. Boucher, recommended that I join the track team for spring because I didn't have a spring sport. I was soccer and gymnastics. And he's like, oh, you should be a triathlete, like a tri-sport athlete. You should do track. And I thought about it and I was like, well, that sounds miserable. Like, just running sounds miserable. That was my thought process in those years. Running was my sports punishment. I ran the least amount that I needed to run. I was a goalie for soccer, so I ran like to the 18-yard box. And for gymnastics, I did some sprints for floor and I did some sprints for the vault and things like that. But even once I was in high school, I wasn't doing very competitive gymnastics. It was high school gymnastics. I didn't like the vault, so sorry, Buffy, but I purposely ran into the vault so that you wouldn't make me do it anymore. And so that I could just do floor and beam. Beam was my favorite. No running involved in that. And So that was my mindset with running. So I want running to stay enjoyable. And I used to think it had to be miserable. Like, everybody just feels miserable running is kind of the thought process I had. In preseason for soccer, like as a goalie, the other goalie who my freshman year, maybe my sophomore year, I think it was my freshman year, the everybody was supposed to run 2 miles under 20 minutes if they wanted to make the varsity team. If you couldn't do that, you definitely couldn't make varsity. And then, of course, there were other things, but you had to run that. And so the other goalie was like, well, coach, we don't need to do that. Like, there's no reason for us to run 2 miles. And I actually was starting to think like, oh, well, maybe I should. I also wanted to feel like I belonged and had actually made the team for my ability, not just the fact that only 2 goalies tried out. So then automatically you make the team. But coach was like, oh, yeah, you're right. You don't have to do that. And so she was super proud of herself. She's like, oh, we don't have to do that. We got out of it. We can go do goalie stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. I kind of wanted to do that. But I also still didn't. But I more wanted to like feel like I belonged, because I definitely did not feel like I belonged on the varsity team my freshman year. And they made it known that I did not belong, even though, little humble brag, I was pretty good. But we used, the other goalie, she probably was better. I honestly don't remember all of those details, but she was really good. So she was probably better, but we also had a seniority type thing. So she was a junior, sophomore, junior, something when I was a freshman. So she was going to get the starting spot anyway. And I was the only freshman goalie that tried out. So I got placed on the freshman team, and then they pulled somebody for JV, and then I got moved up to JV, I think because she got hurt, and then they just like kind of pulled somebody and put them in goal. Long story short, it was just a whole sense of not feeling like I belonged as a freshman. And so I was like, well, this is one way I could make myself feel like I belonged, because I actually made it with my abilities. Anyway, that's a long tangent. So that is to say, like, I want running for me and for you to be enjoyable. You don't have to be miserable. So I design my training plans to make it so that you can keep running for however long you want to, for years and years to come. So one of the ways that you keep things feeling good is try your best to not get out of shape. Try your best to not fall back into, okay, I'm not training for a race anymore. I'm not going to do anything. And then when it's time to train for a race again, I'm going to just start running again, start at a 5K. Remember, respect the distance, right? A 5K is the shortest of the long distances. Even if it's just a fun run distance, for most places, they'll advertise, oh, we're having a fun run. It's a 5K. Fun stands for fundraiser. It doesn't mean anybody can do this distance. Respect the distance. So I'm so happy that this question was asked. What should you be doing? So right now, at the time of recording this, next week is Princess. So typically what I recommend, if you're super close in races, like we went Dopey to Dumbo to Fairy Tale Princess right now, I recommend looking at the training plan, doing the recovery weeks. Now, this is for a distance. If this first part is for a distance that is equal to or shorter than your previous distance. So as an example, let's say somebody did do Dopey to Dumbo. So that means that they trained up to a marathon and multiple race days. And then they went to Dumbo, which longest race for that is a half marathon. So that falls into this. A half marathon is shorter than a marathon. So this advice is for that situation. You go from Dopey to Dumbo by following the 2-week rest and recovery plan that's on my training plan. And then whatever that next week is, which it actually, I believe, was race week, you follow the Dumbo plan for that. So you do the 2 weeks rest and recovery, and then that third week is whatever is on the Dumbo plan. Same thing for Dumbo to Princess, as long as the race distance is equal or lesser. And if you did a half marathon as the longest distance at Disneyland, then you're doing Princess Fairy Tale Challenge. Yes, this is equal because it's half marathon and half marathon. Follow the 2-week rest and recovery, and then that third week, whatever is on the plan for Princess, because there are like 3 weeks in between. So you would do the rest and recovery, and then that following week, you would be into race week. So it's easy miles, maybe it's walking, couple extra rest days. And then from Princess to Springtime, that again follows the rule of half of it's equal or lesser. So Springtime Surprise max distance is 10 miles. So let's say you're going from Fairy Tale Challenge 13.1 miles as the longest to Springtime Surprise Challenge 10 miles. You would do the 2 weeks of rest and recovery. And then that third week, you can actually jump into where the Springtime Surprise training is. And it's an easy transition when it's equal to or less training miles for that race. So 13.1 to 10 miles. This would not work if you were doing 5K marathon weekend to 10K Disneyland weekend. It would not work if you did 10K Disneyland weekend to half marathon Princess weekend. That kind of training, you would have actually had to start earlier. I actually recommend training up. So when you're training, you train for the longest distance that is going to happen within that time frame, right? So let's say you are doing Disneyland to Princess. Because there's only 3 weeks around that, yes, you would start training earlier than you would for Princess, but you're basically following Princess half marathon or 2-course challenge training plan, even if you're doing a 10K for Disneyland. You basically would use that 10K at Disneyland kind of as another training run, but you would have done the longest run for Princess. Said another way, let's say you're doing Wine and Dine 2-course challenge and you're doing Dopey. Wine and Dine 2-course challenge training for this upcoming year is going to start June 15th. I know that one off the top of my head, so I can talk about this. And then Dopey training actually starts June 29th. So I actually recommend start training for Dopey like a week earlier, because you're going to have a couple of weeks off when you're recovering from Wine and Dine. So like my Stronger, Faster, Finisher clients, they don't know this yet because they probably haven't looked far enough in advance. But those that are doing Wine and Dine 2-course challenge and Dopey or Marathon or even Goofy, but I don't think anybody in my crowd is doing Goofy this year. I'm actually having them technically start training for those two June 8th. So even a whole week earlier to accommodate for the 2 weeks of rest and recovery at Wine and Dine. But that means that they're actually going to run more miles leading up to Wine and Dine than I normally would have them do were they not doing marathon weekend. Okay, gets a little complicated. If you want more information about that, send me a DM, runDisney DPT over on Instagram, and I can do a whole podcast episode about the thought process of that. But of course, specific guidance always is reserved for the clients that work one-on-one with me or in Stronger, Faster, Finisher, which technically still is one-on-one, just in a group setting. So you still get the one-on-one answers just in the crowd. We just don't set up one-on-one individual calls. It's the group, and it's fun group. We already have some inside jokes. Go eat a baked potato. And so anyway, with just finishing marathon, let's get back to the original question. Marathon to Wine and Dine. What should training look like? So I recommend keeping up the mileage that feels easy and comfortable for you. So I have some clients who in the past have liked to maintain 5 or 6 miles because that's a fun distance for them. It feels like they've gotten a workout. It feels like it was quote unquote worth it for them to go out for a long run like that. And they feel like they've maintained a good base. For me personally, I like to just maintain a 5K. That is a good distance for me. I do really like the 10K distance, so I will dabble in the future if I'm doing multiple half marathons. Maybe I'll stay trained up to a 10K instead of a 5K. But right now, I don't do that many races in a race year. Have you guys noticed that? I don't. I did Disneyland Halloween half marathon weekend. I did the 2-course challenge. Actually, I did the 5K as well. I did all 3 races. Then I did the 5K in January at Disneyland, and then I'm doing Springtime Surprise Challenge. I don't do them all. I don't seek out local races. I will in the future if I think I could potentially get a proof of time, but I'm not always training for something. I take my time. Like I said, I want to keep it enjoyable, and pushing, next, not enjoyable for me. So I have my relaxed periods and I have my training periods. I'm in the build phase, I'm in the training phase. I'm not always in training mode. And I do recommend that. However, I do know that so many people, the motivation to go and get the medal is what keeps them moving. So I get it, and I'll work with you to manage that, but we need to keep it, down to a point, right? So anyway, what should you do? So choose a mileage that is comfy for you. Let's say you like a 5-mile distance. I recommend after marathon weekend, take 2 to 3 weeks of that rest and recovery. If you did like dopey, I do recommend like 3 weeks. But let's say you took 2 weeks, because 2 weeks is fine. 2 weeks is good enough. The third week is bonus. So let's say you took 2 weeks off and you kept things easy and you did a bunch of walking, which is what I have on my recovery weeks. And then on that 10th day, you got back into easy long runs. And then on that first long run after the race, it's usually like Saturday or Sunday, that's a 5K. On my training plans, that's what I would recommend. So then you can just keep going on that 5K every week. You can do that as a long run. And then in the middle of the week, keep up with your speed workouts. The time between marathon weekend and when Wine and Dine training starts, if you're not doing Disneyland Princess or Springtime Surprise, you're first in the rest and recovery phase. That's at 2 weeks after race day. Then you're in the build phase. So what do you want to do? You can maintain some mileage so that you don't drop down, but I wouldn't stay too crazy high on it, because that just can wear you out. It, like literally and figuratively, it can wear you out physically, and then it can wear you out mentally as well, where it's like, oh, another 10-mile long run. Unless you're really seeking a really solid proof of time for marathon next year, which in this person's case, they talked about Wine and Dine. They didn't talk about next year's marathon. So I don't see why there's any reason you would need to maintain up to a 10-miler. So let's say you like to maintain a 5-mile long run. Well, so that first long run after is a 5K. Then the next week after could be 4 miles, and the next week after could be 5 miles. And then you just kind of cycle through those 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. Now you're probably thinking, well, Dr. Allie, you always say follow the 10% rule. 10% rule is for new miles. If you haven't gotten out of shape and you've only taken the 2 weeks off from your rest and recovery from marathon, these aren't new miles to your body anymore. So you've trained up to 20 miles, 26.2 miles, 5K, 4 miles, 5 miles. Those are no problem to your body. Now, this is, of course, if you had no problems during training. You didn't have an injury, aren't having complications from the training or from the race. This, you're feeling good, your muscles feel loose, they feel limber, they don't have any signs of injury, then you can do this. And so you kind of just keep cycling through 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5, 3, 4, 5. It gets a little boring, but that's okay. Boring is okay. You can work on your speed or your pace during this time. You could use those long runs to practice race pace during those workouts, because again, these aren't new miles for you. So you could do a long run not at an easy pace. Easy pace is for when you're in training and they're new miles. And then you can work on your speed as well during your speed workouts in the middle of the week, and you can increase those speed workouts. Let's say you're doing them for 45 minutes right now, like I have on my free training plans. Well, you could increase those. Let's say you want to get up to being able to do them for an hour. Well, now you just add 10% each week, or not each week, but each time you do the new speed workout. So if you do 30, 20, 10 and hills and tempo and progression, then each speed workout again, you can add 10%. With the one warning, I don't see any reason to need to increase hills beyond 45 minutes. Unless you absolutely love them, hill workouts are so that you can improve your strength and speed to be able to go up and down the hills on race day, the overpasses, and things like that. And you're not going to need to do those for 60 minutes. So why be miserable? Again, keeping things enjoyable. Like, let's do the least amount that we have to on that one, unless you are really loving hill workouts. I haven't met you yet. If you are a person who likes hill workouts, nobody I talk to loves them. But anyway, 30, 20, 10, you can increase by 10%, progression increase by 10%, tempo increase by 10%, and you can go from there. So then you can be working on your speed as well. Remember, build phase is about building strength and speed in the off season before you start officially training for the race, so that you're faster for next year. I was just talking to one of my Stronger, Faster Finisher clients yesterday in our coaching call, and B, in our DMs back and forth in Voxer, where she had written out all of her paces from her pace testing, and she dropped 3 minutes per mile on all of her paces, easy, moderate, and hard, by following the process. And so she's still training right now for race season. And so things have gotten faster because she has followed the plan. And we started in the build phase for her and just built on from there. So she had a jump start. And when she started training for this past season, mainly dopey, she was already faster. And then that just carried through even when she wasn't purposely trying to get faster, because she was in training mode. And I know this information because she actively shares this with me. I am a huge proponent that pace is not everything. Of course, we do need to maintain the pace so that we don't get swept. But I mentioned this on my call yesterday at Stronger, Faster Finisher. The paces that my clients have go in and out of my brain. I don't hold on to them because I am more concerned with, did you have fun and how did you feel at the end of your long run, at the end of your race? How are you feeling overall? I will celebrate the heck out of you when you say you got a PR, as long as it's not on a new long run. But if you're excited about a pace, if you're excited about a PR, I will celebrate the heck out of you. But I probably won't be the first one to notice unless you tell me that ahead of time. Like this client, she will tell me, I'm aiming for this particular pace on this particular race, so that I know to look for it when I see those numbers, and I'll celebrate it with her. Otherwise, I need you to tell me, because I want to hear, how did you feel and did you have fun? Paces are not everything in my world. Of course, we need to maintain the pace to cross the finish line ahead of the balloon ladies and to be able to have time for character stops. And I will help you get there, but I'm not always paying attention to it in particular. And I would love to hear if you as a listener have these big wins. I will help celebrate the heck out of you. If you're a current client of mine, I will celebrate the heck out of you. And I want to know first, are you having fun and how are you feeling? And let me know those paces. So you can do these things in the off season, in the build phase. That's what I call the off season, the build phase. Cycle through paces, cycle through distances, long run distances that are comfortable for you, that you enjoy. And you're like, oh, I got a solid workout today, but it wasn't too much on my body. I'm still looking forward to running. It isn't becoming a chore. And then work on other things that you want to work on. Do you want to work on strength in this build season? Do you want to work on your pace in this build season? And then once Wine and Dine or your next race training starts, you can pick up right there at the 5K, because you maintained at least a 5K and you worked on these other things. You kept it enjoyable so that you feel good and you're having fun.